And welcome back to Blow Up the Team. Jeremy here today. We're going to be doing a draft recap for the Denver Broncos. We've got Matt here with me today, although I think he's planning on being pretty passive on this one.
Probably. Uh, what's there to say about this Broncos? You suck since Peyton Manning's been gone, and my dad hates you
I
because he's a Raiders
mean,
fan.
valid. Although I would argue that Peyton Manning was not the reason that that football team was good, but that's
No, no, well, I know, just they haven't done anything since.
we'll just use that as a little thumbnail from when the last time they were relevant was. But moving on, I think that I'm gonna just remind everybody again, the rankings that I do at the end of the video are only based on draft and not based off of anything else the team has done in the offseason. So don't expect any trades or anything to really be reflected in there. Um, I will start off the video like I usually do with a quick recap of the offseason and as well as how they positioned themselves last season to know that what I'm looking at when I'm trying to figure out what they needed to fill in and what they did or didn't cover. Um, and any like clips that you see, highlight clips, the original video that I got them from is going to be linked in the description below, so make sure to go check that out. But other than that, I think we are ready to get this show on the road. So let's talk about the 2019 Denver Broncos for a second. Um, they finished 7-9. After which they fired Rich Scangarello, who was their offensive coordinator, and they made Pat Shermer their offensive coordinator. Um, that seems to that's I think something that was needed. That offense was definitely not the best last season. They did not make many moves in free agency that I could see. They did have they did have one big signing, Melvin Gordon, which I'll talk about in a second, but they didn't have quite a large quantity of name signings from what I saw. But they did have a big splash in the draft. So let's talk about 2019. 2019 offense. They were 28th in the league or fifth worst in yards per game, passing yards per game, and points per game. And they were 20th in rushing yards. So this offense just never really seemed to hit its stride last season. It had flashes with a young quarterback like Drew Lock, but it was just a matter of they just never really seemed to get consistent production, and it definitely showed in how their season turned out. Um, they did sign Graham Glasgow from Detroit to start at right guard, and they signed Melvin Gordon to a 2-year contract. And Melvin Gordon will do two things for that offense. One, he'll be able to, he adds receiving. I think the biggest thing that he adds is his receiving out of the backfield. Um, and he also he's just a consistent threat with the ball in his hand. So if you can get him the ball, good things tend to happen. He may have had a little bit of a not quite normal Melvin Gordon year last year, but hopefully everything kind of returns to normal for him. And they also signed tight end Nick Vanette to a 2-year contract. He'll be slotted at tight end 2 behind Noah Fant. Or Fant, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Moving on to the defense, they were 12th in yards allowed per game, 11th in passing yards allowed per game, 16th in rushing yards allowed per game, and 10th in points allowed. So as you can see, the defense was definitely the bright spot of that team last year. They are, like I would argue, probably a good 75% of the reason why that defense even not that defense that team even finished at 7-9. Just that defense's ability to step up and make plays when they needed it to was something that we kind of saw in spurts all season. Um, you obviously still have Von Miller roaming the outside linebacker spot, and Von Miller is one of the best in the league. He has been for years, so um, that's a bright spot for your defense. They also retained defensive tackle Mike Purcell, so to be starting nose tackle. So um, that was key for them to be able to re-sign him and keep that defensive line in good shape. Um, they also traded for AJ Boye, or yeah, Boye maybe, from Jacksonville for a fourth-round pick. He's looking to be a starting cornerback this year. They also traded for Jarrell Casey from Tennessee for a seventh-round pick, and he's expected to be a starting defensive end for them. And finally, they signed Shelby Harris to kind of round out that defensive line there. So that's four you know you're going to get consistent production out of your defensive line. Will be able to get in the passer's face as well as blow up run plays. So the defense is still looking to be good for next season. Now let's get into the draft. They had 10 selections in the 2020 draft. They traded for two extra third round selections on draft night and a sixth rounder, and they had already held two seventh round picks. Um, and so let's get started looking at the draft here. First round pick for them, they went with Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver out of Alabama. Jerry Jeudy, in my opinion, was probably one of the best overall like skill position talents in the draft. He's a very solid route runner. He's got great footwork, and he tends to find the soft spot in the zone well. Um, he's got good speed, so he can stretch the defense vertically, and he's just got good hands and body control, which creates a large catch radius for a young QB like Drew Lock. It's something that you're always going to be looking for, especially if they get a little rattled under pressure. For somebody to be able to go up and make a play on a football, even if it's not the best thrown ball in the world, is going to be important. And more importantly, it gives Drew Lock two young guys he can build chemistry with, along with Cortland Sutton, who he just looked like a star last year. Um, or at least he showed flashes of a star. And hopefully having an influx of talent along that wide receiving core will allow him to kind of open the field up a little bit more and um, kind of take some of the pressure off of Cortland Sutton as well. Jerry Jeudy is looking to be wide receiver 2 in the depth charts right now, and I think that was a great pick for them. I think he fills the need well, and I think that he's going to be a talent in the NFL. I don't really see any way how he isn't. And then following that up, they went wide receiver again in the second round with KJ Hamler out of Penn State. Um, he's a much smaller guy, and he's expected to be a slot receiver. He's got good burst speed, which has helped him in developing into an above-average route runner. He's just able to create separation off the line with that burst speed. He did not record a 40 time due to a bad hamstring in the combine. However, his film just shows that he just tends to have elite speed. He's just blowing guys away. Um, and again, this just makes them have another huge threat to take the top off of coverage and stretch the defense vertically. So they're really looking like a young quarterback that they're probably going to want to air the ball out, as well as a young wide receiving core. They're really giving themselves a chance to stretch the field.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, like, especially a guy like this where he misses, a pretty big part of the combine for, especially at his position. That's going to hurt his draft rank. And so I think he potentially could have been a higher round pick if he was just, and this is coming from a second round pick. I feel like it would have been an even better pick if he had a more contested pick if he had been,
Healthy.
able to record that 40. And so I think they might have gotten, depending on how it turns out, of course, but I think, potentially have a steal out of getting him.
Yeah, I mean everything in the tape shows like he has potential. The one drawback that I did find when I was trying to do some research is that he's obviously a smaller target. I think he's listed at 5'9", which creates a smaller catching radius, and he just has a tendency to trap and drop passes a little bit. So he's got to work on his hands a little bit. But he's still listed as a wide receiver 3. So that's going to give the Broncos a very young top 3 wide receivers to try and transform that kind of lackluster passing attack that they had last season. Um, and like I said, they needed wide receiver help, and they attacked it aggressively early in the draft. So that's something that as a Broncos fan that you can look forward to, that you've gotten so young. Let me see how young Cortland Sutton is. Yeah, Cortland Sutton's only 24, and then these two guys are obviously both rookies. So that creates a very very young wide receiver core that Drew Lock can kind of try to build chemistry with and grow around for coming years. So that's something that you can look forward to. And going on next is Michael Ojum. Ojemedia. Sorry, if that last name is a little doozy. Um, he's a good size at corner. He's got long arms and he's got good top end speed. He did have 6 interceptions last season. He can struggle a little bit in man-to-man field down the man-to-man coverage down the field. Excuse me. This was one of the picks that I kind of looked at, and it seemed a little questionable to me. Um, it seems to be almost like they went early in the third round, or at least mid third round here. They went for almost like a depth chart filler or a project piece. I mean, right now he's listed as a third string cornerback for them. Um, I feel like they maybe could have gotten Another corner that could have been a depth chart filler like that later in the draft. Obviously, you can't guarantee talent-wise what would be left, but I feel like this team has enough other holes that needed addressing that they didn't need to go this pick this early in the draft um, with him being only listed as a third string corner. I feel like they may have been able to get a better value pick here, but obviously we're gonna have to wait and see what he's able to turn into out of Iowa. So that will be interesting to keep an eye on. Next up, they went with Lloyd Cushenberry III, center out of LSU. Um, they traded up to get this kid. He's well built and he's got good mobility. He's also got quick hands and he's just got good awareness and pass protection. Honestly, um, he does need to build a bit more strength to hold his ground better against some of the power rushers, especially the ones that he'll face at an NFL level. Um, but he tends to work up to the second level well in the run game, and he's listed as the starting center day one. So like I was saying earlier, you're looking for guys in the first 3 to 4 rounds, especially that are going to be able to step up and make an impact day one. And he's definitely one of those guys. I think that he'll help shore up the interior of that offensive line, well. And I think it was a hole that they needed to fill. So, um, that was a smart decision by them to trade up and pick him. And it doesn't look like because of the fact that they were able to fill that spot and he didn't slip away that maybe this cornerback pick here in the third round was maybe not as bad as it was initially seeming to me, but it does just feel like to get a third string in the mid third round. Um, they must see something in him potential wise. So that's definitely somebody that they must feel like has a high ceiling and that they're just willing to put in the time to work on. Next up, McTevin Agim, excuse me, defensive tackle out of Arkansas. He's got good size and length, and he's just got flashes of quickness off the line. He tends to be able to blow up plays in the backfield, and he chases the run well and finishes when he gets there. He does need to work on his hand fighting a little bit, but he does flash potential as a pass rusher. He is, as of right now, listed as a backup defensive end, but I would expect him to get some reps throughout the season as they look to develop him. Also, the defensive line was one of those things that it feels like a lot of teams tend to have a kind of a rotation of guys that will kind of get in there throughout the season, which I mean, it makes sense that they're the motor of that defense. Really, the defense typically tends to go as well as the defensive line is going because they just create so many problems in the backfield, whether it's rushing the passer or stopping the run. So I think that was a smart pick from them there. Get somebody young that'll be able to kind of learn from some of those veteran guys that they got along that line and be able to step up and be an impact player. I would even expect in some situations this year. Um, Next up, so I
I'm
apologize to this young man. I apologize. That last name is just a doozy for me. I don't know if my brain's just not in it today or what it is, but um, anyway, tight end out of Missouri here. He has all the physical intangibles. He's got good size, speed, and length, and he just seems to be able to line up anywhere for the offense. The tape and statistical production though just don't seem to match the talent and potential that he has. He does look like he struggles as a route runner a little bit, and he can't seem to consistently create separation without having to push off. But he does have the speed to be a threat after the catch. Um, I have it written down here. He's technically listed as your fourth string tight end or tight end number four. Um, but I feel like he has all the physical intangibles and all the physical talent to become an effective NFL player. It's just a matter of how that's all going to translate to the league. We've talked about it before. A lot of times when guys go to college, they're not worked into the system as effectively as they could be for a lot of reasons, whether it's quarterback play or specific schemes from specific schools. So um, he's got all the intangibles there that you would be looking for in a tight end, a big body tight end. So it's just a matter of how they can develop him over the years and work him into the offense over time. But moving on to the next one here, we got Justin Strnad, Strnad, outside linebacker out of Wake Forest. I couldn't find a whole lot on him, especially since Wake Forest is not necessarily the biggest football school. Um, but I did find that he seems to locate and track the ball well, and he's got average closing speed, but he's got good awareness in range and zone coverage. Um, I wouldn't expect him to be a huge impact player this year, which is not surprising as we start to get later into the draft. But getting depth at that position and allowing them to kind of learn and grow later in the draft is not a bad pick for them. Especially coming from a smaller school, you never know what you could or could not be getting from somebody like that with limited tape on them. So next up, we got Natane Moody or Mutai. There's a lot of different ways I could pronounce that name. I have no idea. Sorry, names are not my strong suit. But he's an offensive guard out of Fresno State. Um, he does seem like he's a bit injury prone. He did miss like large chunks of the past 2 seasons with injuries. But on the tape that we do have, he just looked impressive. Despite having shorter arms, he just seems to have elite strength. I have written down that he had the fourth most reps of 225 pounds in combine history, and that strength definitely seems to correlate to his play. He has the capability to just knock defenders off balance with his strength, and he stays engaged in pass protection despite those shorter arms. As of right now, he's listed as a third string guard, but if he can stay healthy, I feel like he has the potential to develop into a solid lineman. It's just all a matter of health for him and how he's able to kind of adapt to being at an NFL level. But on an offensive line that kind of needed a little bit of help, I feel like that was a smart pick for them to take a flyer on somebody in the 6th round like that. That he has all the intangibles, or not all the intangibles, excuse me, but he does have the strength and he's shown promise. So I think that was not a bad pick for them to pick him up later in the draft and just take a flyer on him. And then the last 2 picks here, I'm not going to get too in depth into either one of them. They're 7th rounders. They both seem to be depth chart fillers. One of them was an outside linebacker, the other at wide receiver. Um, so again, those guys, especially when you get late to the 7th round like that, or into the 7th round, you don't really know exactly what to expect out of whatever your pick is. So um, I'm not gonna grade them too harshly on whatever pick they made in the 7th round there. I think that overall they had an active draft, which was something that they needed. I mean, if you think about it, the Broncos had a rough they've had a rough few years here where they just seem to always kind of be hanging around like mediocre, but never really kind of having that outbreak season. And they've definitely had a bit of a turnover as well at quarterback. So hopefully they found a consistent threat there with Drew Lock, and as the team looks to grow, they've got Philip Lindsay, they've got Royce Freeman, and then they just signed Melvin Gordon, so the rushing game should be looking solid for next season, especially with a recently refurbished offensive line. And they've also strengthened their wide receiving core, so I think they position them well for next year. But in terms of what they did specifically in the draft, I think that they were aggressive, which they definitely needed to be, and I think that they made an effort to fill in holes where they could. Um, the one note that I do the one note that I just feel like they missed out on is it just felt like they missed out on a tackle. Again, like they signed guards, they made other moves for guard, they signed some guys as well, um, and then center they made the big draft pick in the 3rd round, but it just felt like offensive tackle was something that they could have needed a little bit of shoring up on, and they never looked that way either in the draft or from what I personally saw when I was reading through their transaction report so far. Um, and again, I do question a little bit that first 3rd round pick that they had with the corner out of Iowa. He's got the potential there, but it feels like it was a little early to be taking flyers on project pieces, in my opinion. So with all of that in mind, I do think that the rest of the moves that they made were smart. I just do think that those two things are kind of gonna hold them back from really having gone after it and getting them a higher grade. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna slot them in here at a B plus. I would have probably given them an A minus or an A if they had taken an offensive tackle, even with that pick at the corner position early in the 3rd. But between missing out on a tackle as well as not having um, a surefire first 3rd round pick at corner, and him looking like he's going to be a project piece, I think I'm going to slot them in at a B plus. So I think for me that's really what I was looking at. I don't think I have too many other things that I had notes on. You have anything you wanted to add, Matt, after you hear my rant there?
No, mean, I think they had a really good draft, and I think that they hit the vast majority of what they needed, and so definitely could be an overall improved team. But so I don't really have much to add, really.
And I just want to say really quickly, you know, there's a lot of reasons why certain guys, like I do know that there was a lot of guys that I was thinking, oh well, they didn't necessarily do this in college, but you know, I'm always going to try to give some of these guys the benefit of the doubt if where I can. Like if they've shown upside, I'm going to point out their potential more than I'm going to point out their weaknesses because, I mean, that, you're hopeful, right? You're hopeful as a fan, so do keep that in mind. But I think overall that's it for me. So I'm going to go ahead and say, if you liked the video, leave a like, comment down below if there was anything that you feel like I missed, or maybe if you agree with me or disagree with me, go ahead and leave a comment down below. So hit the subscribe button if you want to come back tomorrow for Matt's Colorado Rockies video. Um, before we go to Detroit early next week. Um, other than that, check out our Discord and our social media in the description down below, as well as make sure to check out the highlights video in the description as well. Think that will be it for us for today, and we'll see you next time. Peace.